So, the film starts off with a crazy story about a mysterious yacht found in Tokyo Bay. Apparently, the Japanese Coast Guard stumbled upon a totally abandoned boat with no sign of the owner. But here's where it gets really wild. All of a sudden, the water starts steaming and bubbling like crazy, and the Tokyo Bay aqualine ends up collapsing and getting flooded with this strange red liquid. The Japanese government tried to play it off like it was just some underwater volcano, but this guy, Rando Yaguchi, he wasn't having it. He believed that there was some massive living creature causing all this chaos, and nobody wanted to believe him until they saw a massive tail breaking the surface of the water. Can you imagine? The government had told everyone that the monster wasn't going to surface, but next thing you know, it's stumbling around on its back legs, using its tail to push itself forward and knocking down buildings left and right. And get this, it was secreting this red, gooey liquid from its gills and pouring it all over the streets as it went. The prime minister even sent in helicopters to attack it, but when they got close, the monster suddenly sprouted these massive arms and stood up on two legs like it was human or something. Crazy, right? Eventually, the attack was called off because there were still people trying to evacuate the area. And the monster? It just went back to the ocean like nothing happened. So basically, when the giant monster showed up in Tokyo, the government was all like, don't worry, it won't come back. But of course it did. And this time it was even more crazy. It destroyed buildings, cars, and boats like they were toys. Prime Minister sent out a bunch of helicopters to attack it, but they had to stop when they found out people were still in the area. Meanwhile, the government was trying to figure out how to deal with the monster, and some American lady named Kyoko Ann Patterson came in to help. She told them that the monster was actually discovered by a zoologist named Goro Maki, who named it Gojira, which literally means incarnation of God, in his hometown. And when the Americans got wind of it, they renamed the monster Godzilla. Eventually, the researchers found out that Godzilla was eating nuclear waste, and that's why he was all radioactive and overheating. The fission caused Godzilla to leave a trail of radiation in his wake, and the overheating forced the radioactive monster to return to the ocean to cool off. However, a few days later, Godzilla returns, and this time he's even bigger than before. The Japan Self-Defense Forces tried their best to stop him, but their weapons had no effect on the colossal monster. Because of this, the U.S. military intervenes and offers to attack Shin Godzilla, and they deploy B-2 Spirit stealth bombers to Tokyo. However, the Prime Minister and other government officials realized that they were in Godzilla's path of destruction, so they fled in a helicopter. Well, Yaguchi and other officials escaped in cars. The bombers did manage to injure Godzilla, to some extent, but he retaliates with a terrifying atomic beam from his mouth, destroying parts of Tokyo and downing the helicopter with the government officials. But thankfully, soon after, Godzilla finally stops moving and goes into hibernation because of expending so much energy. So now they have a bigger reason to figure out what's up with Godzilla and stop it. The areas of the city that Godzilla blasted with his beams are crazy radioactive, and the radiation plume from its breath and fire is drifting out to sea. They investigate the frozen Godzilla and discover that it's slowly generating nuclear energy. Turns out that Godzilla is powered by nuclear energy, and it exhausted all of its energy during its recent attack, which is why it's frozen. It's recharging its batteries, which will take a couple of weeks. On top of that, they found out that Godzilla has radar-like system in its body that allows it to take out bombs and planes with pinpoint accuracy using its dorsal beams. So it turns out that Godzilla is even more of a threat than we thought. And the crazy thing is, its dorsal spines and blood work like a cooling system. So as long as there's air and water around it, it won't die. And get this, its parts can regenerate into new Godzillas, which is why the scientists are worried that if they don't stop it now, they could be facing multiple clones of this monster. Meanwhile, the scientists also discover that Godzilla has more DNA information than any other creature on Earth, 8 times more than the human genome. Some scientists believe that because of this, it's highly evolved and may continue to evolve further. They even speculated that it may sprout wings. Things are getting even more serious because the US government wants to take over and drop a nuclear bomb on Tokyo to try and kill Godzilla. They're giving the Japanese people just 2 weeks to evacuate before they carry out their plan, which is why the scientists and the government are trying their best to avoid a nuclear attack on Tokyo. So they came up with a plan called the Yashiori strategy. The idea is to make a blood coagulant that will cool Godzilla's temperature down, causing it to freeze. The team worked hard to make it happen, and they barely made it on time thanks to Patterson's quick thinking even though it was risky. In a daring move, they send driverless trains carrying bombs to crash into Godzilla's legs. But it wakes up immediately and starts defending itself by shooting beams from its mouth and tail. However, this consumes its energy quickly, leaving it vulnerable as it walks into a line of skyscrapers. The Japanese use this opportunity to knock down the skyscrapers on Godzilla, immobilizing it. The first attempt to pump the coagulant into its mouth fails as Godzilla destroys the pump trucks with its atomic breath. One of the leaders notes how Godzilla's skin is becoming stiffer. But a second, larger force of driverless trains is sent towards Godzilla, which makes it fall forward and sprawl on top of a large building. The second pump truck force then pumps the full amount of coagulant into its mouth, and Godzilla recovers quickly, destroying the second pump group and walking forward again. Suddenly, it lets out a loud roar and freezes in place over Tokyo Station. The operation is a success. So basically, the Americans put a hold on their plan to bomb Godzilla with a nuke, but it's still on the table if he wakes up again. Japan is left to pick up the pieces and rebuild with Godzilla frozen in place. In the end, we see a shot of Godzilla's tail, and there are a bunch of creepy human-like skeletons with dorsal plates coming out of it. Guess it's not the end after all. Shin Godzilla will come back and will continue to evolve.